Hey guys, it's Bastian time. Welcome to Zelda News. I'm your host Bastian. Let's get to that first story. Some really interesting fan art. Basically, this person took some things like Lon milk and then heart pieces and various Zelda items, the magic beans and so on, and then created like old-timey posters that you might see at the turn of the past century. Really fascinating idea. It sort of reminds me a little bit of those Hylian tourism posters that came out a while back that were kind of in a similar poster style. Really good stuff. If you want to check out more of those, there's a link for you down below. You might remember in a previous Zelda News episode I talked about those handmade Hylian backpacks and other Zelda bags and such. This person is making pillows that are Majora's Mask and the Hylian shields. Really well done, I think. If you want to take a look at some more of those, there's a link for you down below. Glitterberry, famous for having been the translator, basically, of Hyrule Historia, both the fan version she sort of organized, and then the official version for Dark Horse Books. She is now working on a big series that's translating something that we didn't really ever know much about, which is the Zelda Box, it was called. And it was released for people, it was like a special deluxe version of the Wind Waker. And in it came this really interesting book that sort of is like a whole Hyrule Historia about the Wind Waker. It's interviews with the team that made Wind Waker, and a lot of really interesting stuff comes out of there. One of the most amusing things that caught my eye was Mr. Miyamoto saying that his favorite character was Salvatore, and I have to say I agree with him. Salvatore is hilarious. Definitely one of my favorite characters in any Zelda game. Did you know Gaming pointed out some interesting bit of Zelda info, which is that Mr. Aonuma was tasked with creating Ura Zelda, which Ura I guess means flip side, or basically it was supposed to be Ocarina of Time, and this was going to be a year later, a year after Ocarina of Time came out, and it was just going to be remixed dungeons, but for the most part it was going to be Ocarina of Time, just with some new features and so on, and new remixed dungeons. He was not interested in that whatsoever. He said, no, Mr. Miyamoto, I promise you, if what you really want is a Zelda game to come out in a year, I'll create a brand new game. I'll just reuse the same assets from Ocarina of Time, but I'll create a brand new story, and so on. So Mr. Miyamoto sort of let him throw down the gauntlet and said, okay, you have a year, try to make that game. If it doesn't happen in a year, we're just gonna have to release Ura Zelda. So yeah, Zelda Gaiden was what eventually became Majora's Mask. Ura Zelda did eventually get released, sort of. An adapted version of that came out as the Master Quest for Ocarina of Time. So really interesting stuff. Now, when this story posted around the web because of Did You Know Gaming, there were tons of people who were saying, no, wait a minute, Ura Zelda is not the Master Quest, but actually, according to Zelda team, it, for all intents and purposes, is. Really, Master Quest evolved out of what they were planning on doing with Ura Zelda, which was just taking Ocarina of Time, mixing things up a little bit. So, anyways, fascinating stuff. We might have never gotten Majora's Mask if Mr. Miyamoto had his way, so it's kind of something to think about. But anyways, that's it for this episode of Zelda News. Tomorrow's another Nintendo News. See you then, guys. Bye. It kind of reminds me of those tourism, Hylian tourism,